Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to this session on conversion, faith, and social conditioning. We have an exciting webinar for you, and the key question we're asking today is, are conversion and religious experience the result of social conditioning or programming? I'm Dr. Gordon E. Carkner, a PhD in philosophical theology, Meta-Educator with UBC postgraduate students. I'm a blogger, author, and YouTube webinar producer. Here are the organizations that I work with: Graduate Christian Union and Graduate and Faculty Christian Forum at the University of British Columbia. Our motto in all this is never stop thinking. So here's the big picture of our presentation. First of all, contextualizing the question that we've just asked, an encouragement to examine our own position. Thirdly, authentic Christian conversion. What is that in the end? Fourthly, truth matters and so does relevance. You'll see why that's important. And then fifthly, reverse thunder. That's where we ask some tough questions about the plausibility of any worldview. And finally, some bibliography and conclusion. Thanks for joining us. It's really great to have these encounters through YouTube and these learning experiences. They're really quite exciting. So what is social conditioning at the end of the day? That's what we're trying to examine as it relates to faith and philosophy, I guess you could say, or other worldviews. First of all, we want to contextualize the question. There is much truth to this statement. No one decides or acts in total isolation. We're all influenced by our parenting and our various academic mentors. In fact, without social conditioning, life training, and communal supports, we would not flourish. We'd not do well. Secondly, many social factors influence our choices and practice of religion, our secular outlook or nihilistic belief. We are continually affected by both our past upbringing and our present environment. These factors are absolutely inescapable. In fact, when you think about it, culture and society are already in motion at our birth. So we enter a world that's always moving ahead, and we have to find our way in this world. Yet, this sort of social conditioning does not preclude genuine freedom of choice in religion, or in a philosophical stance, or in anything else in life. We're never simply bound by our influences. We live in dynamic interaction and sometimes real tension with them. First, we'll look at bad faith conditions. So these are the conditions where often the stereotype of faith as merely the result or the product of social conditioning comes from. There are many people, however, who hold to their religion or skepticism simply because they were brought up in it, or because they have succumbed to the pressure of a peer group or the academic discipline in which they find themselves. Peer pressure is powerful. Fitting in with a group of friends feels good. Rebellion against the group or one's upbringing is hard work, can be alienating and lonely, and it requires hard thinking. Why not just pick a tribe and stick with it? Unfortunately, others come to a specific faith through manipulative, mind-bending techniques that violate personal integrity and choice, as in damaging cultic isolation. There are bullies and propagandists out there everywhere in the world who want us to join their movement and support them financially. So this is one of the concerns that is raised today. And young idealists are vulnerable at the age of university students, vulnerable to these charlatans and shamans, especially when they move away from home or find themselves isolated or sad. They often prey on our personal vulnerabilities. Say you just had a relationship breakup. So these are the things that come to mind for many when they accuse a Christian believer or a believer in any faith of being the product of mere social conditioning. So that's why we move to the next point, which is to examine your position. This is really critical. There are also, this is on the other hand, there are also authentic religious choices. Some people make radical changes in their convictions after much thought and deliberation. It takes time to think through your worldview, to make sense of the world. I often say many walks through the woods, by the lake, or by the ocean, to really reflect on who you are, where you've come from, where you're going. In fact, people often consciously and intelligently choose to go with or against their upbringing or peer group out of courage and deep conviction. And this really is in a context of serious reflection on life. It's not bad faith as such. Adolescence, which is 18 to 25 or thereabouts, 16 to 25, is a key formative time to think critically about what one believes or values and why. So it's important to affirm people in this process during this stage in their life. Critical thinking is a necessary skill set for a mature movement into adulthood. And that's not easy. Employing a robust combination of critical faith and critical reason, many people are personally convinced of the truth of their own religion, including Christianity. So some people will decide to stay with the Christian faith, other people will decide to leave it. So at this point, we're saying that it is possible to rationally come to a belief in Christianity and all that it has to offer, because it looks both attractive and plausible. So we want to encourage our audience to read, investigate, pursue thought. And this is a picture of one of the places where I spent a lot of time, the Oxford Radcliffe Camera, where I did my PhD, a lot of my PhD research. I also want to say something about my experience at Queen's University in examining my faith and examining hard questions. It was part of my experience as a young Queen's University undergraduate in life sciences. I looked at many different worldview options in my 4 years there, with numerous bold sessions in dorms, pubs, library, and coffee shops. It started with my uber intelligent roommate. His name was Pete, who decided to become an atheist as a university student. He taught me a lot about the give and take of dialogue, mutual listening, and debate. And we disagreed about much, but I tried to take his questions seriously and also the questions of other guys on my floor. It was intimidating at first, but eventually I learned how to hold my own ground and ask my own tough questions. This creative dialogue supercharged my university experience, and I'm very thankful for it. I became a much more secure Christian believer as a result of this debate, together with discussions I had with Christian students and professors and my own church attendance. So this experience, really, I have to say, sparked my interest in apologetics, which is with me to this day, and also my further studies in philosophy and theology. So at the end of the day, what is a reasoned faith? How can faith and reason work together in examining one's worldview and one's trajectory in life? How does it help us think through or drill down into the meaning of our lives? These are really important questions. Because it animates life, makes sense of key phenomena, and answers some of the big life questions, people do make lifelong commitments to their faith. What we believe and the heroes we follow shape our values and our stance in life. In college, it's time to decide on the parameters of one's existence, especially one's calling, purpose, and identity. Genuine, open-minded Christian conversion often happens during these years of growing individuation, whether we have been brought up as a believer or a skeptic. Tim Keller notes that it takes faith also to believe in atheism in his book, Making Sense of God, because it cannot be finally proved for or against the existence of God beyond any doubt. We need reasons of the mind and reasons of the heart combined with the imagination to see the truth, beauty, and goodness of a philosophical worldview or personal faith. It's good to move beyond the naive faith of childhood to more informed and reasoned faith of an adult. This means that one is in critical dialogue with the larger world. In a sense, we need to make sense of the world, make sense of reality. This occurs over time during a myriad of discussions with peers and professors, as well as personal reading of the Bible, philosophy, apologetics, history, and literature. Many people come to a reasoned, reflective faith from an atheist or agnostic background. So, as you probably know, conversion goes both ways. People leave the Christian faith, people enter the Christian faith during their university years. But the key is to do it on the basis of good reason and good evidence. So, after we look at those basic questions, what is authentic Christian conversion? Genuine Christian conversion depends neither on the suddenness of the commitment nor on the intensity of accompanying emotion. That's not the key factor. Authentic faith is as distinct from the passive acceptance of tradition as it is from the eager grasping at passing fads. You certainly don't want to choose a faith based on some sort of health and wealth gospel. Former UBC President Dr. Santa Ono recently emphasized how important faith is to the mental health and well-being of students in our public universities. He noted that for students to ignore these questions of faith, personality, values, all those sorts of questions of meaning and purpose, these questions are important to who we are as human beings. And it's wrong to put them on the sideline while you do your academic work, say in engineering or science. While it is often initially hesitant and accompanied by many doubts and questions, faith eventually grows and matures into a sustained reasoned trust in God. It means a positive, life-changing results. The worst thing one can do regarding faith is to check your mind at the door. I remember a quote from Professor Flannery O'Connor, a famous writer. She said, "We should all be asking tough questions as we sit in class, equipped with a healthy degree of skepticism. Don't give up on your faith," she says to Christians, "without a fight, no matter how brilliant the professor. Think things through for yourself and don't be superficial. In the end, your professors may admire the courage of your faith stance." And this is exactly what I found at Queen's, to my delight. In my work with students in recent years, we have found worldview analysis very helpful in this process. A holistic, deep structure, consistent, coherent worldview gives meaning and parameters for a life of growth and discovery. It sets us free. It's also very fruitful for dialogue and comparing one's faith to that of other perspectives. So we want to encourage young adolescents to think, to examine, to question what they believe, why they believe it. But added to this, a transformed life is also key to authentic faith. Without a transformed life and a new vision, faith seems rather pointless. It should set you free to be a more human, give you joy and hope. These are real spiritual drivers. Meaning, for instance, religious experience without a growing change in behavior and growth in character is simply not a Christian experience. It lacks significant existential dimensions. Jesus said, "By their fruits you shall know them," in Matthew 7:16. He emphasized repentance, turning from evil to good, a full reposturing of the self, issuing in a whole new life trajectory. And I've seen students go through this. A whole new identity emerges through immersion in his teaching. For example, the beautiful teaching in the Sermon on the Mount. This involves renunciation of narcissism, rejection of a false self to embrace Jesus as Lord and guide. His followers take the moral high ground of integrity and compassionate responsibility for others, social responsibility, as Jim Wallace talks about in The Uncommon Good. I appreciate his writing a lot. So, Christianity is definitely not easy belief for a lazy person. It entails a stringent demand to think differently, often and live differently, often counterculturally. People become a higher priority than power, wealth, or success. Kierkegaard, the Danish philosopher, agrees that by this criterion, many of us who call ourselves Christian would be self-excluded. They are asleep spiritually, living on a merely aesthetic faith. Socialization and conditioning are simply not enough. In fact, such complacency can produce even a dangerous and harmful religion. So what we're saying here is a commitment to a life-giving journey is required. It's the way of grace, forgiveness, healing of broken relationships, breaking down barriers. Honesty and humility are complement to this lifestyle. It is a whole new lifestyle. And finally, we want to say something about how truth matters in this process. That it's not just a matter of a belief commitment, but that the truth of that belief is critical. Commitment cannot stand alone. In the final analysis, Christianity is concerned with the issue of truth. This is the ultimate test for every commitment, every conviction. Faith needs a solid grounding in reality. Truth quality separates good faith from fantasy, ideology, or superstition. We must avoid lies at all costs. Here are some of the pressing truth questions. Is God there or not? Is it a God-shaped, God-blessed universe, an enchanted world that we inhabit? Does he have a demand in our lives? Who is Jesus Christ, and why did he claim to reveal God to us? What is the significance of his death? Did he rise from the dead? Does a Christian answer to the big questions of life's meaning really make the best sense of human experience? There are many others that invite serious investigation. They are part of the plausibility, as we say, of the Christian faith. Relevance also matters, of course. Does it resonate with a robust, mature existence? Will God be there at the bedside of my dying wife or child? Does it have cash-out value in the marketplace of life? Will it give me strength of character, resilience, and perseverance through the challenges, seductions, and temptations of life? Will it help me to deal with my addictions? So what is the road forward? Important question in this beautiful scene. I want to say the final point is we want to talk about reverse thunder or hard questions for any worldview on its plausibility, its credibility. We should remember that cultural atheism or post-structuralist nihilism are also forms of social conditioning with their own tribes and their own values and commitments. Even if they are associated with big-name philosophers or scientists, they are not beyond critique. Assumptions should be revealed, as in the days of Augustine with the Roman and Greek scholars, where he talked about how faith seeks understanding. Modern and late modern positions of faith are riddled with all sorts of assumptions that need to be examined, says David Bentley Hart in The Experience of God, and Alvin Plantinga, top philosopher, in his book, Where the Conflict Really Lies. Another Canadian philosopher, Charles Taylor, in his award-winning tome, A Secular Age, shows that atheism and other forms of skepticism are not accurately seen as logical progression from science. Instead, they entail a moral religious stance with respect to the world. He calls this exclusive humanism. It's a definite commitment, a faith commitment. Atheism entails such a stance and a form of worship with self-interest as a top priority. And nihilism, ironically, offers a meaningful claim to meaninglessness itself. So these things must give us pause if those are places where place our faith. One must take the honest journey forward and examine the evidence and the plausibility of one's commitments. This is something sometimes painful, but ultimately quite rewarding. Some will indeed change worldviews and change heroes during their lifetime, during their university years, but also during their life. And I want you to see Manhattan's Tim Keller, who's very good on this discourse, in his book, The Reason for God and Making Sense of God. He creates a positive, accessible, and reasonable discourse that examines evidence and arguments, but also raises tough and pertinent questions for skeptics and agnostics, as well as Christians. I highly recommend also James Sire's book, The Universe Next Door, for an overview of worldview assumptions, several, in his case, 7 different worldview assumptions, which cover a pretty broad gamut, I guess you could say, in terms of today's world. So what is our conclusion? The challenge, I think, to each of us is not to passively acquiesce in our social conditioning, nor to join an academic cheerleading squad of a cool philosophy professor or maybe English professor. Complacency produces a stifling, dangerous religion or anti-religious bias. Instead, the better approach is to think through the meaning of life and critically examine your current assumptions. This applies to all perspectives. Once examined, do commit yourself vigorously to your worldview. But at the end of the day, never stop thinking as you go. Try to live consistently with it, but never stop thinking. And we finish with some bibliography and resources. I mentioned some of these books already, but I would encourage you to read Paul Gould's book, Cultural Apologetics, and Rebecca McLaughlin's Confronting Christianity on some of the tough questions. There's also an interesting book by Philip Yancey called Reaching the Invisible God, which answers the question, if God is there, why isn't he more visible? And then finally, on my blog site, I have an Apologetics Creativity Center where you can look up resources, and I ask further questions for investigation of worldviews there. And then another blog called A Rapprochement Between Faith and Reason, where I deal with some of these issues in more detail from top scholars from around the world. Finally, I recommend Peter Kree's top 10 books at this site. These are books he says we should read before we die. So thank you very much for joining me on this important topic of social conditioning and faith or belief. And I just trust that you will take this seriously and make a commitment to working through what you believe, why you believe it, and where it takes you. Thanks for joining me. All the best in your journey. Bye-bye.